and welcome to week one of the Jane Austen MOOC. I'm here with Kate Borthwick, who is one of our technical directors on the course, and we're going to be running through some of your comments and expanding a little on some of the ideas and some of the discussion threads that have been popular this week. Kate, what would you like to say about the New Look course, because you've been instrumental in designing it and getting it up on the web?
Yes, so this is the second run of this particular course, and when we ran it the first time we had a lot of lovely comments and feedback from the participants on the course. Many of you I know have returned for this second run, and the feedback we had was that we were cramming in too much and you wanted to have more time to think about the ideas on the course and to discuss them all together. And so what we did was we stretched the course out a bit, didn't we?
Yeah.
And so we now run it over 3 weeks, and we've moved much of the content around. But we really got excited by that first run of the course, and we wanted to create new content. And so Alison has written some wonderful new steps about money and social capital, and what Austen thought about money in relation to life in the 18th century. We also have some quite detailed reading task, or one task related to Mansfield Park, where we ask you to go away and find Mansfield Park online, read a few chapters, and then respond and think about what's written in those chapters. We also have some extra content on celebrity, written by another of our lovely tutors, Amy, and Kim has also thought about what sensibility meant in the 18th century. And so we have some nice content on that in week 3. And so in week 2, have a look at that content about money and social capital, and then in week 3, go and think about sensibility. Obviously the course is now over 3 weeks. If you want to keep access to the course for a long time once the course has finished, then you might want to consider upgrading, and then you can keep all the content forever, and Alison and Amy and Kim's wonderful new content as well. So please consider doing that. So without further ado, what has everyone been talking about this week? I believe there was questions around whether it was socially acceptable for women to write books in the 18th century.
Yes, there were quite a few comments on this actually, and as tutors, myself, Amy, Kim and Gillian have been trying to address it, but we thought it would be a really interesting thread to try and bring out in this roundup, and hopefully more people will then join in the discussion. It was socially acceptable for women to be writers in the 18th century. In fact, it was one of the very few things which women were allowed, in inverted commas, to pursue professionally. Now, if people are interested in this, there's a couple of books which I'd like to recommend. The first is pretty much a classic on this topic, and it's by a lady called Cheryl Turner, called Living by the Pen, and that's definitely worth getting from your local library on an interlibrary loan if you can. And the second is slightly more nuanced but very, very good, by an American academic called Betty Schellenberg. And the book is called The Professionalisation of Women Writers in 18th Century Britain. And this is really interesting, Kate, because what Schellenberg is saying is that women could be actively and avowedly professional writers. It wasn't that they had to sort of hide themselves behind the mask of being a lady, which of course is how Jane Austen chose to publish herself, but that there was a lot of autonomy within the publishing industry at the time, and women effectively could choose how they were perceived. And there were writers such as Frances Burney, we have to call her, who actively put herself in the male literary tradition. So she looked to male predecessors as her kind of literary mentors. And then you would have ladies like Sarah Fielding, who were very, very learned. I mean, she translated Xenophon. She was incredibly well educated, very intelligent woman, but she chose to develop a slightly more amateurish persona. And Schellenberg argues that as a consequence, we perhaps remember Frances Burney because she has made it into the established canon, whereas writers like Sarah Fielding dropped out, perhaps because of how they engineered their own authorial personas, as much as the great forgetting, as it's called, of women authors. But certainly there were women writers writing professionally. Mary Wollstonecraft supported herself entirely by her writing, and it was one of the few areas which a woman could acceptably make a living in.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think, because anecdotally we kind of think life must have been so much more difficult in lots of ways, in every way, for women then compared to now. Something, just to pick up on what you were saying, I have to hold my hands up and confess it was a good 20 odd years ago that I read all of Austen's novels and had a look at 18th century women's fiction. I know that lots of people on the course maybe haven't got the experience of these authors that you mention and reading these books closely or recently, like in my case. But that hasn't been a problem, has it? I think on the discussion forums we've had a lot of diverse experience.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. And also part of the joy of this course really is that there are extracts from novels such as Self-Control, which people who haven't experienced kind of wider 18th century women's writing can go and read and then use that as a springboard to compare with Austen's writing. So I think actually the course is ideally structured to allow people perhaps their first immersion into the wider world of women's 18th century fiction.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So don't worry if you're thinking I haven't read all these things that we mentioned.
No.
That's part of the discussion that we all bring into the mix. Our new impressions and our sort of amateur, aged impressions, I think.
Yeah, I think drawing on from what Kate said, something that I would like to mention is that there have been the odd comment about people feeling that perhaps they can't contribute to the threads or the discussions because they don't feel that they're well read enough or learned enough. This is absolutely not the case. This course is very much about empowering learning, and we are absolutely passionate about making sure that anybody of whatever level of education or experience can come onto the course and can take something out of it. You don't have to have an enormous bibliography of Austen and other women writers and critics and that sort of thing. We are just really interested in you experiencing the texts that are on the course that we've given you access to and your response to that. And any response is absolutely valid. Any ideas that you have, any thoughts that you have, we're going to come on and talk about Austen and detective fiction in a minute, and some people might find that a bit out of left field, but any responses and ideas are valuable because they help other people enhance their own understanding of the books. Even if you feel that you don't have a lot of experience, you might have one point that nobody else has ever thought about. So please don't feel that you can't contribute. You can contribute. Your contribution is tremendously valuable, and we would love to see you being part of the discussion threads and on the various discussion boards. So please come along and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, actually, I'm going to bring Shakespeare into the conversation. So there were some questions really about connections between Austen's work and Shakespeare's work.
Yes.
And of course, I'm sure a lot of people out there are now thinking, oh goodness, I haven't read every single one of Shakespeare's plays. What kinds of things were people saying?
Well, there have been three big responses. The first was about likening the relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy to the relationship between Beatrice and Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing, and whether or not Austen had sort of used this as a model or whether it was a sort of homage to Shakespeare. There was another mention of Twelfth Night, and there was a mention, I shouldn't really be saying this, but it's in week 2, about Mansfield Park and the section that we've set as close reading as being
really?
something like Midsummer Night's Dream.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, remember
And
that for week 2.
Midsummer Night's Dream, it's up on a thread already. And I thought this was really interesting because one of the things which we explore during the course is, of course, Jane Austen's love of theatre.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very much part of the books. Again, we have Mansfield Park, where the characters actually put on a play. But Austen and her family used to have family theatricals. They used to read aloud. They used to write and act little plays. At Chawton House, Kate, there is the most amazing little manuscript, and it's tiny, tiny, tiny. And it's in Jane Austen's handwriting, and it's a play of her favourite novel, Sir Charles Grandison. And what we don't know is whether Austen wrote it herself or whether she was transcribing it for somebody else. But it was very much part of the Austen family. So I think it is highly likely that Austen may either have borrowed or been inspired by Shakespeare's works as part of her writing.
Very likely. Sounds very likely. Yes, indeed. And certainly, I think Chawton House is open to the public. So if you wish to go and see the manuscript that Alison has mentioned, you can do that, which is really exciting.
It is there. It's absolutely beautiful. It's exquisite. And leading on from that as well, we've had another thread which is just gathering pace this morning about likening some of Jane Austen's plotting, her style and her intricate plotting with detective novels. Now, I'm going to confess, Kate, that I didn't know this till I read it on the forum this morning, that P.D. James actually said that Emma was the first detective novel.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I had
Really?
no idea.
How interesting.
Absolutely.
Why? Why is Emma the first detective novel?
Well, Emma, in my view, I don't know the P.D. James quote, unfortunately, but Emma is very, very, very tightly plotted. A lot of Jane Austen's novels are about problem solving. If you're the heroine, it's almost like a board game. You need to get your heroine up the ladders to the happy marriage at the
Mr.
end of the
Darcy.
book. Yes, and not sliding down the snakes that are Mr. Wickham.
Okay. Yeah, I like that
Okay.
idea. Yeah.
So it's a problematic. Your heroine has to solve the problem of who the true hero is, and Austen kind of puts the clues in the text. So as the reader, we can see these, but because we've only got the information that the heroine has, we kind of have this partially limited
Interesting.
view on the world. So she kind of lays these little clues. And Emma is one of the most intricately plotted books. So as well as who is Emma going to marry, who is the true hero, as the kind of major conundrum of the book, there is, what's going on with Frank Churchill? Why does he keep disappearing off? What's going on with Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax, particularly? Who does Mr. Elton love? There's all these kind of mini plots and mini conundrums, and Austen kind of puts the evidence in front of us, and we have to learn to read the clues and decipher and find out what's going on.
Well, I'd never considered that, but I think the answer is to get onto the course, and we'll put a link to where this discussion is taking place, which step that's taking place, so that you can join in and you can take part and feed in your ideas about whether Austen is actually a kind of earlier Agatha Christie or P.D. James or not. Fascinating.
And also how her plot and how this very, very tightly plotted style that she has, how that feeds back into your experience of her books as a reader. Because it's one thing that is absolutely fundamental to understanding Austen is that she is writing from her heroine's point of view. You only get this partial viewpoint. You only see the things that her heroine can see. But she will put things in plain sight. And if you can unpick that and decode that, you're kind of working alongside the heroine. You're experiencing that journey with the heroine. So it's fundamental as part of your experience as a reader and how you interpret and decipher and relate to Austen's text.
Fantastic. So it's another way of understanding what a brilliant writer
Yeah,
Austen
absolutely.
was and how she constructed her novels. Brilliant. So what else were people talking about?
We've got a couple of really interesting threads going on at the moment. One of which I would like to pick up on is it's a bit circular. It's the idea of novels talking about other people reading novels, and how novels were perceived in the 18th century, and how Austen uses that debate in her books. And I'm sure you're familiar with Northanger Abbey,
Yes.
which has a plot line all about Gothic fiction and how to distinguish reality from fiction. But Austen wasn't the first person to use that plot line.
Really?
So she's drawing on a very well established tradition that authors such as Charlotte Lennox, with her absolutely brilliant novel, The Female Quixote, use exactly the same plot device where the heroine cannot distinguish between reality and what's in the novel, with hilarious consequences. If you want a really genuinely funny novel, go and read The Female Quixote, because it is absolutely brilliant.
I think that's one to seek out, definitely. Is there anything else we need to add before we need to finish?
Very quickly, we've also got another discussion which is really worth getting involved with, on female education, and we have had a couple of really excellent points made. We've had Bobby, who has said that Austen actually uses the debates about education in her novel, so she's not just putting the debate in, she's making it do double duty. So she's using education to make a point about her characters, how her characters respond to education, the type of education that they've had, and how they view other people's education is a very valuable key in understanding them as characters. And I think that's a really, really clever point that Bobby's making there.
Excellent point.
Excellent. And also Leandro, who makes the point that education in the novels is used very much as a social delineator. So we've got two parts of this debate, Kate. We've got, what is education for? Is it for the social, moral or intellectual formation of the individual? And this leads on to the secondary question of how Austen is actually using that debate within the novels, because it's done very subtly, very nuanced, and it does double duty. She's telling us other things about her characters and about society at the same time as engaging in that debate.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I guess we need to end there.
We do.
Lots to talk about all the time on this course, which is fantastic. So please keep putting your comments on the steps, sharing your ideas. We love to hear them. And we love to engage with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's lots to look forward to in weeks 2 and 3. So stay with us and keep commenting and keep posting.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next week.